first gear on the Rocket. God damn. It's a very different experience than, Jesus, your traditional sport bike or something like that. But hey, you know, it does it. It's more willing than a Turbo Hayabusa, that's for sure.
You know, if I were to design a touring bike, I wouldn't do some off-road BMW thing that pretends like it's gonna be all enduro and everything. I don't think I'd do something kind of like a Goldwing 6-cylinder, even though the Goldwing is pretty cool. This right here is probably what I would design if I were designing a touring motorcycle. Because Triumph basically took their Speed Triple engine and they said, you know what, mate? Double the displacement. And then they put this gigantic 2500cc, 2458cc if you want to be pedantic, sized engine inside of this Rocket 3 GT. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I love this motorcycle. I think this bike exists in the rarefied air with the Turbo Hayabusa and the ZH2 of these, quite frankly, abomination motorcycles that really shouldn't exist, but they do anyways. And as a side note, how did we Americans let the Brits beat us to the biggest motorcycle engine fitted to a motorcycle? Shouldn't we have that title? Come on, America, get your stuff together. I'm so disappointed in this country, but not for the reasons you think so. So today, we're gonna take a detailed look at the Triumph Rocket 3 GT. I'm gonna let you know how rowdy it is, how fun it is, if it works as a touring motorcycle, and if you should go and get one. Let's get into it. First things first, and I want to get this right out of the way, the sport touring dads and the big long distance dads are going to tell me that this bike can't possibly do sport touring duty. The windscreen is too small and there's no saddlebags and blah blah. Your opinion's invalid. Your opinion's invalid. 2500 cc's. None of what you say matters. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Also, we got this motorcycle as a loaner bike from the good folks over at Eurocycle. So we actually had to give back the race-prepped RSV4 that Chris let me rip around on, which is actually his personal motorcycle. And I said, can you please send us a Rocket 3 GT? I rode one a while back and I didn't get a chance to make a video on it, and the people have to know how amazing this motorcycle is. And he said, you got it. Got us the GT with the foot forward controls in the shop here. So do me a solid. Hit up Eurocycle down in the description below, rideeurocycle.com. Get your next motorcycle from them. Tell your Papa Yam they sent you. You'll get $300 off your purchase. And they have a great dealership over there, man. You can get the bike ordered directly to your door from the website. It's a really great experience. I've bought like at least 10 motorcycles from them at this point, and it's always gone very, very smoothly. Tell them your Papa Yam sent you and get hooked up. So let's jump into the specifications on this bike because every number is bigger than you think it is. Alrighty folks, so the Triumph Rocket 3 GT features a base MSRP of $24,100. The Rocket 3 comes in a couple different configurations. It has an R version with more mid-mounted controls and a more lower handlebar, but the GT is really the one you want if you're a kind of thoughtful, forward-thinking adult. A 2458cc triple-cylinder engine is featured in this motorcycle, making 165 horsepower and 163 foot-pounds of torque. That torque is actually part and parcel with the largest engine capacity ever seen on a production motorcycle, and it actually has a 71% higher torque figure than the closest competition as quoted by Triumph, and that torque comes on at 4,000 RPM. Yes, this thing redlines at like 6,000 RPM. At 4,000 RPM, you get peak torque. Insane. This thing weighs about 641 pounds dry. It's probably close to 700 pounds with the gas and all the oil in it, because trust me, an engine that big is going to require a lot of oil. It actually features a 47mm fully adjustable Showa front suspension, and it actually has a fully adjustable monoshock out back. Really cool frame on this thing, bespoke to this bike. It doesn't share any componentry or any other frame, obviously, from any other motorcycle in Triumph's lineup. Single-sided swing arm, shaft driven. Really, really nice Brembo stylomic calipers up front. It's got a TFT display that lets you toggle between 4 different modes: rain, road, sport, and a rider configurable mode. The craziest part about this bike is the fact that it features a 150 section tire up front and a 240 section tire out back. So it's basically a car tire out back and a Ninja 400 tire up front. it's crazy. It looks beefy and as much of a thick boy as you'd imagine in real life. It's insane. I showed my fiance this bike, and she said, "Why on God's green earth is it so damn dummy thick?" It features a 66-inch wheelbase, which is just absolutely bonkers. To give you guys context, a normal motorcycle has, I think, like a 55 or 54-inch wheelbase. Don't quote me on that, but this is a long, low, wide, heavy motorcycle, a powerful brawler of a muscle cruiser. Other features are heated grips, cruise control. You got some really nice amenities like that on this thing, and overall it's built to the fit and finish you would expect from any new Triumph leaving the dealership floor. On top of that too, this motorcycle is probably going to get you about 150-ish miles of range, 140 miles of range out of its 4.5-ish gallon tank. And yeah, so you got pretty good amount of range on it. It doesn't have an amazing 250 plus mile range like some other offerings do, but this is definitely all about making a very powerful statement while you're out on the road. And speaking of which, let's get it out on the road, see what it's all about.
All right, guys, we've talked specs, we've talked features, nothing left to do but to ride the damn thing. So mounting up on the Rocket 3, first of all, you'll notice I've got the keys in my pocket. It's got a side-mounted ignition like the Speed Triple and a lot of the newer Triumphs, so it's all keyless and stuff. You swing a leg over it, and it is a very commanding position on this motorcycle. Really pretty comfortable ergonomics. Foot forward controls, as you can tell on this GT model. The R model actually has a little kind of mid-mounted situation like this. I actually like the forwards on this bike. I think it makes a lot of sense. USB right here, which is pretty cool. Little cigarette lighter thingy. And yeah, nice TFT dash as we talked about earlier. Let's fire it up, shall we? So you flick it like this. Comes to life, and then like every Triumph, you have to put it into neutral, pull on the clutch, pretty sure. Nice TFT here situation. Start it up here. It's a huge engine on this thing, and you really feel it as it comes to life. It's burbling away. It's got this diesel-like quality to it, and you flick the wick on the revs, and the whole thing moves because of the inertia of the engine. Like I'm not moving it like that. I'm just flicking the throttle. The whole thing bounces. So we're gonna do a nice little like kind of cruisery ride here. This is gonna be pretty different than my normal little test ride that I do. I'm gonna take a nice scenic route on this thing and see how it does as an honest to God like sport touring, or not really sport touring, like power cruiser, long distance bike kind of thing. But first we gotta check the slow speed stuff, shall we? So we'll be here in this parking lot. And a big bike like this, you would expect that it would be pretty hard to handle, but the rider triangle actually lends itself pretty well to tight maneuvers. It's actually not very difficult at all to do really tight stuff in a parking lot with this thing. It's kind of a point and shoot. And the reason why is because the Triumph has really good clutch control, really good fueling, and a nice rear brake. And you can kind of put this thing where you want to put it. It's actually very confidence-inspiring to ride in slow-speed situations. Even for me, a rider that's not really used to riding 700-pound motorcycles like this. I think the biggest bikes I ride typically are 530, 550. You know, my Hayabusa is like 560, I think, and big adventure bikes are about that big. So for this bike to wear its weight this well is a big compliment to Triumph's engineering prowess. It's really a very balanced machine at low speeds in a way that you wouldn't really expect. But you have to mind that rear brake though. You really have to feather the rear brake and ride this thing a little bit differently than you would a normal standard bike in a parking lot. But let's pull out here onto this road. We got a bit of traffic. I've got the bike in sport mode with TC on. I wanted to see how the traction control handles 163 foot-pounds of torque. And we're going to try to get a nice little pull in here onto this road. And then we're going to talk about its GT potential, shall we? God, this engine is bananas. It's bananas. All right, first gear on the Rocket. God damn. Oh man, that's so much torque. And it's anywhere you want it in the revs. It's interesting because this motorcycle redlines at like 6,000 RPM, and you're basically going to keep it to, you know, between 2 and 5,000 RPM, which is really similar to like a big bore Harley or a diesel truck or something. I'm pretty sure my truck actually redlines higher than this bike. I think my Ram does at least 62 or 6300 or yeah, 6300 RPM. This thing literally redlines at 6. And this bike actually makes more power and torque than my first car that I owned. In high school, I had a Mazda 3. This thing makes 20 more horsepower and torque than that car did, and it weighs probably about a fifth as much. So that's insane. That is absolutely crazy. But, you know, the thing about this bike that I think gets a lot of people, you know, up in arms about is it's a GT. Triumph sells it to you as this kind of long distance touring thing, and the freaking sport bike dads and the Goldwing dads are all like, you can't do big miles on that thing, it doesn't have a windscreen, it doesn't have the saddlebags. But I think this bike actually works really well for someone who maybe is a little bit younger and doesn't really care about that stuff as much and just wants something that is absolutely ridiculous. This is such a bold motorcycle, and it doesn't really care about your saddlebags or your wind protection, but it still provides you with the stuff you need to do a nice touring ride. I've got heated grips, I've got cruise control. That's really the stuff I care about. Oh, it doesn't have wind protection. That's fine by me. No bike that I ride really has any wind protection anyways. And yeah, you feel it in your chest a little bit, but I don't know, you just kind of get used to it. It's really not a big deal. And I kind of ride a motorcycle to feel the wind. I don't really ride a motorcycle to feel zero wind buffeting. If I wanted to do that, I would just get into a car. I like feeling the wind. I like feeling the sense of speed. Now, the forward controls here, as a rider who barely rides foot forward controls, is a little awkward at first for me. I'm used to motorcycles with mids or traditional sport standard pegs, so the kind of foot forward thing is a little funky, but you get used to it really quick, and I really do prefer foot forwards on motorcycles like this. This is not a motorcycle with a bunch of sporting intention. Yes, you can lean it over into a corner, which we're definitely going to show you guys later in this video. I'm taking this bike out to one of my favorite twisty roads, Lime Creek Road. So this is a bike that definitely can get it in the corners, but it's not really like begging to be leaned over on the side of the tire. Wow. Oh, come on, man. Come on, man. Why'd you get in front of me? So I like the foot forwards, honestly. It adds to the kind of road presence that this bike has and the kind of allure that it has. I feel like it needs to have forward controls. I feel like a bike like this with mids. I've ridden it with mids, actually. I forgot to mention to you guys. I've actually ridden a Rocket 3 before. This is not my very first time riding it. I rode one in Tucson in 2020 as part of like the Triumph Ride experience or whatever, and I lost that footage. Something happened with my SD card. It got corrupted. I can't remember, but I didn't end up posting the video because that sucked. So it's taken me like 2.5 years to get my hands on another Rocket 3 by way of Eurocycle, as we mentioned. Thank you very much to Eurocycle for providing the bike. And yeah, it's been a pretty sweet experience so far. It's exactly as I remembered it, just this ridiculous power cruiser thing. But yeah, so I rode both of them in Tucson. The one with the mid-mounted controls, the R version that's supposedly more sporty and more stripped back, and then this GT version that has the fly screen, the foot forward controls, and some of the other features as well. And I gotta tell you, I really do like the GT version. If you get a passenger on this thing, you'll have effortless power to keep them on board. You're not gonna feel weighted down. It's got the remote adjustable preload thing. So it's really nice, man. It's a motorcycle that I feel like, you know, actually does make sense as a long distance bike. The one thing that is a little bit of a damper on this bike in terms of its long distance potential is the fact that it doesn't have much in the way of range. This bike has about, I think, a 4.5 or 5 gallon fuel tank, and man, this thing sips fuel like you'd expect a 2500-ish cc engine to do. That's pretty hectic here today. But yeah, this motorcycle definitely consumes fuel at a much higher rate than other bikes, and you know, that's gonna put it to where, you know, you're probably gonna get about 140, 150 miles of range out of this thing if I were to guess. And for the average Goldwing dad, you know, they want to see a number above 200, 250, stuff like that. But I don't know, man, like, it's not that hard to keep a bike with 100 and something miles of range, you know, for a long distance. I think a lot of guys overthink the long distance thing. Like, sure, there are sections of Utah, for example, that I've driven through that, you know, there's no fuel service for like 100 miles. But, you know, pack an auxiliary fuel tank, or make sure you get gas before you clear those areas. And they're honestly so few and far in between in the country that it's not that big a deal. Yes, you may have to stop a bit more frequently for gas, but I really do think that this bike provides such a unique experience that it was kind of worth it. This is awesome. One thing I love that this bike does is on the over rev on D-cell, if you keep it in a gear, wow, that's a lot of torque. If you keep it in gear, it has these wonderful little pops and crackles. But yeah, so as we mentioned in the beginning, this motorcycle sits on a 240 rear section tire, a 150 up front, 700 pounds, really low, kind of low slung, like 30-inch seat height. So the whole thing is low, long, wide. So is it as nimble as an SV650 or an R7 or some other sport bike? Of course not, guys. It's how could you possibly expect it to be? But for what it is, it's pretty decent. You know, Triumph fitted these fully adjustable Showas up front, and the frame design itself is, you know, it's not like a freaking you know, M8 Harley with a big steel cradle frame that doesn't do anything for anybody. This is a pretty sophisticated motorcycle, and honestly, for the price they're quoting, it is a pretty good value for money. You know, to get a comparable Harley with all these features and this kind of torque, well, first of all, you can't buy a Harley with this amount of torque, so there's that. But if you were to build out a Harley that even had close to the amount of torque that this thing has, and with all the features and the creature comforts, it'd probably be like $45,000. So this thing, I think, actually fits a pretty good bill. See how it hustles. It packs on speed really fast, and it's deceptive because the engine's not really revving that high, so you feel like you're not going that fast, but then you look down and you're like, Jesus, I'm doing 70 already. How is that even possible? I feel like the motor's not even turning. But you have to readjust yourself to Rocket 3 life. That's exactly what this motorcycle does. You have to really readjust a lot of your perceptions of motorcycling when you're aboard the Rocket 3. But yeah, these feel like the roads that this bike is made for. These kind of gentle sweepers, beautiful countryside. This really feels like what this bike's meant to be doing. So an interesting thing I'm noticing in the little amount that I've leaned this bike over, I've barely leaned it over, but in the little amount I am, it appears that it requires an additional amount of effort to keep it on line. It feels like it wants to actually come back up off the line that it's on. You have to keep pushing it down. And that's probably due to the fact that the tires are so wide and the motor is so powerful that when you get on the gas, it probably just wants to literally rip the thing back upright. So it feels like it's constantly trying to right itself back up, which is a pretty good feature for a bike that makes 164 foot-pounds of torque and 165 horsepower. But boy, is it an enjoyable and rewarding thing to ride. It's really nice. And I know that people are going to tell me I'm a Triumph simp and blah, 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 but I like this motorcycle, man. If I were to own a cruiser, this would definitely be the cruiser I'd get. This is so cool. And it's really unique. It makes so much torque. It's absolutely insane. The star of the show here is definitely the engine. Like, you know, they basically built a motorcycle around this engine, and it's just crazy what they did here. The fact that this is a production motorcycle is insane, but it's awesome because, you know, I own a motorcycle that makes about 160 something foot-pounds of torque. It's my Turbo Hayabusa, right? And, you know, that thing does not feel like a refined, put-together, well-built motorcycle. You know, it's some crazy backyard, you know, hodgepodge thing that we put together, and, you know, it doesn't feel like it's supposed to be doing that. But this bike, everything was designed around the amount of torque it was going to make. They knew it going in. So the frame, the tires, everything about the setup here is designed for this amount of torque. Wow, it's really rewarding to ride. Just kind of managing it through those twisties, cracking open the gas at apexes. There's such a nice spread of torque on the drive on this thing. It's so nice. So yeah, the bike has pretty good flick in. It's a wide, low bike, so, you know, you gotta work with what you got. And the drive off corners is really lovely, you know, like you can be in any gear anytime, and it really just propels forward with an unnatural amount of force. It really feels like this bike is unnaturally fast, which is the best thing you can say about it. But I do think it kind of lives in that rarefied air among the ZH2 and the Turbo Hayabusa and, you know, some of these insane motorcycles. You know, who the hell puts a 2458cc triple with 165 foot-pounds of torque and 165 horsepower into a motorcycle? Like, that's absolutely bonkers. And it's power in such a different way, because like a lot of, you know, the ZH2, like, yeah, it's got about 100 foot-pounds of torque basically off 2,000 or 3,000 RPM because of that supercharger, but it's really when it starts ripping the top end where you're like, holy crap, this thing's crazy. This thing at low speeds, you're like, whoa, that's crazy. It's an immediate kind of crazy that is more similar to like a huge stroked out V8 in a car than some high revving little turbo engine in a car or something like that. There's no waiting for this thing. There's absolutely no waiting for the power. The power is everywhere. Now, I will say the suspension, you know, I might need to have to just dial in the settings a little bit, but riding it bone stock as it is, as it came from Eurocycle, I find the rear end to be quite bouncy, quite hard on the rebound. It comes back really quick, and I actually feel there's a lot of like stiffness at the rear here, which is not a great sentence, but you get what I'm saying. And yeah, I think for a GT bike, you'd want it to be a little more kind of easy going. You wouldn't want something as stiff. You want something a little more, I wouldn't say wallowy, but something that absorbs bumps and rebounds a little slower. I don't need it to rebound so quickly. This isn't a race bike. All right, guys, we're waiting for the road to clear a little bit. I did want to talk about engine heat. So the Rocket does run kind of hot. It's got these 3 huge exhaust pipes coming off the side of it, and if you do sit at it for a while on a light or something, it does get pretty warm pretty quick, which is not super pleasant. So we're just waiting on here, letting the gap open up a little bit more, and we're gonna go ahead and take off now. Take off like a rocket. How you like that? All right, so Rocket in the twisties. How's it do? We're about to find out. So front end isn't super confidence inspiring. It's very raked out, so the front is really like kind of flayed out there, and you know, it's a bike that it kind of just wants to stay upright, so you got to fight it a little bit, and it's a big beast to fight, that's for sure. As you'll notice, I'm taking it very ginger on this ride, because that's just a really big beast of a bike, man. It's not the most confidence-inspiring thing, I will say that. And the foot-forward rider triangle also doesn't lend itself to a very sporty nature. But, you know, if you're just getting after it a little bit, having some fun, it'll do it. It's not gonna scare you or anything. The front end, again, just feels a little choppy. That's the best way I could describe it. Just a really choppy kind of front end. Doesn't feel super willing to lean over. Opened up here. Oh yeah. Just that casual street pace, baby. Yeah, you know, like it's a very different experience than, Jesus, your traditional sport bike or something like that. But hey, you know, it does it. Definitely likes the more flowy stuff, that's for sure. Yeah, it's like, it's so violent with the torque that also feels like it's upsetting the bike a little bit, you know? Like the front end squirms a little bit, and then you get on the gas, and just that initial kind of input of power really upsets the whole thing. It's just like, gah, go, you know? Just really trying to go all the time. It's more willing than a Turbo Hayabusa, that's for sure. Because it's not going to scare you. It's, you know, given the power that it makes, it feels really immediate with the power that it makes. So you're not going to get all upset about it. You know, it's not going to scare you mid-corner because it's, you know, it's got a really linear power band. It's just got a gigantic power band, and it's the fattest thing you're going to feel. But, you know, it's not going to scare you. What's going on? Why did it just die? Well, that's not good. Okay. Well, that's not good. It kind of just died. It says it has gas in it. Weird. Well, that was the Rocket 3 ride. I now have a giant problem.
Well, look at you. You've made it to the end of another Yami Noob video. You should consider yourself pretty lucky because I have curated this one right over here for you to continue watching. It's probably just as good as the one you just saw. Unless you hated the one you just saw. I don't know, maybe leave me a comment down below about how much you hated it as well too. Or just keep watching this one. Make sure you keep watching Yami Noob. Don't forget to keep watching Yami Noob. That's the most important thing. Keep watching Yami Noob.